afternoon and welcome to this edition of KTN Newsdesk. Such a pleasure to have you with us. My name is Edith Kimani. Now, police this afternoon are saying, look, we are not sorry for dispersing the crowds yesterday that gathered in Parliament to protest. And at the same time, Kenya is presenting her human rights report in Geneva. What exactly will they say, and will it include incidences such as the ones we saw yesterday? Do stay tuned for all those details. My name is Edith Kimani. Newsdesk kicks off right away. Right, let's begin with the story in Cabinet. And after getting the nod from Parliament, 15 of the 16 Cabinet nominees were early this afternoon sworn in and taken to office at a brief ceremony held in State House, Nairobi. Now, the event was presided over by the Head of Civil Service, Francis Kimemia, and witnessed by the President, among other invited dignitaries. The Cabinet Secretaries are expected to assume duties immediately. Now, already the secretaries have been allocated offices and are actually expected to hold meetings with permanent secretaries in their respective ministries. Late last week, the team underwent an induction program after vetting by the Parliamentary Committee on Appointments. Parliament yesterday approved all the 16 names after a heated debate where some members were opposed to the appointment of Phyllis Kandie to the East African Affairs, Commerce and Tourism Foreign Affairs nominee. Amina Mohammed missed the ceremony as she was handing over her previous docket at the United Nations. We'll have more details of that story shortly, so do stay tuned for that. To the story we had intimated earlier, the police force has defended the use of force in dispersing protesters outside Parliament yesterday afternoon. Now, they were speaking at the weekly media monitoring session, and police spokesman Charles Owino actually termed the move by the protesters to dump pigs in front of Parliament as a public nuisance, and that such acts should be discouraged.
As much as we had to pass a message, or even to say that we needed to put MPs to the notice on the demand of the salary. But I think the extent to which we used pigs had a lot of negative implication, in especially the limitations to enjoyment of our fundamental rights and freedoms. But on top of it, apart from the demonstrators who came with pigs, another group of hooligans, maybe who are called by some people, also came in and they started fighting. The demonstrators with pigs vis-a-vis the other persons who are not police officers. And therefore there was need to disperse the groups that were there.
The second day of the status conference on the ICC cases against Deputy President William Ruto and radio presenter Joshua Sang kicked off at noon, and that's Kenyan time. The duo who were allowed to travel back home after yesterday's conference were represented by their lawyers, that's Karim Khan and Katwa Keegan. Ruto had pledged to cooperate with the court even as he pleaded his innocence. Now, both Ruto and Sang argued against the prosecution's request to bring back 2 witnesses withdrawn in January this year and to also introduce 3 new witnesses. Ruto is further seeking to have his trial postponed to November and to be allowed to attend his trial via video link. I know that Asha Mulu is following the proceedings of that case and we'll be bringing you the details in our subsequent bulletins. But to a really interesting story on health, primary school girls across the country, listen up, you'll start receiving free cervical cancer vaccines. The government is targeting girls who are aged between 9 and 13 years to try and fight the disease. The Public Health Ministry kicked off the pilot project in Kitui Primary School, where standard 4 girls were vaccinated. Here are the details.
And we have also introduced screening for cervical cancer in this county, and it is working, as you said, it is working pretty well. Kenya has licensed a vaccine that prevents cervical cancer, and it is also available in the private sector. To reduce death and disease from cervical cancer, the government, through the Ministry of Public Health and Sanitation, Ministry of Medical Services, Ministry of Education, plan to introduce routine mass vaccination with HPV vaccine to eligible girls to protect them from cervical cancer in future.
From Kisumu, we shift gears, from Kitui, we shift gears to Kisumu, where two gangsters who raided a shoe depot in Kisumu's Accra Road have escaped with about 100,000 shillings in cash. Now, the two thugs, who were both brandishing AK-47 rifles, raided the store at around 10 a.m. and held the staff and clients hostage for about 30 minutes. Customers who were in the premises were also robbed of valuables before the duo escaped, and that was just as police arrived at the scene.
Nilikuwa nimekaa hapa hivi, wakaingia wawili. So unajua venye waliingia wawili, mmoja alikuwa na gun. So mwingine akanilalisha chini. So unachikati ile kitu imeanguka. Akanilalisha chini. Akaniambia nitoe do zote tuko nazo. Akaingia kwa draw. Akachukua hizo do, after kuchukua hizo do, akaniambia hizi tu ndo do mko na hizi do kidogo. Nakwambia hizo ndo do tuko nazo.
Still on insecurity, 4 suspects have been arrested for allegedly stealing electronic appliances in Kiambu. There has been a wave of violent robberies in that county, and in one incident last week, a watchman was actually killed and another one critically injured when thugs broke into the Kiambu Municipal Council office and then made away with at least 200,000 shillings. The area OCPD, Moses Lumbisia, has assured residents that he will fight any criminal activities in the county and restore security.
We have arrested the suspects, and that is a syndicate that has been operating mostly in the Nairobi area. And we do believe that they could also be extending some of their illegal activities in Kiambu. And we hope that as a result of this arrest, crime is going to drastically go down.
To the other side of that scale of insecurity, which is prison and reforms. And you know what? Prisoners in Kenya will soon have a smile on their faces once measures to improve their living conditions are implemented. And that's according to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Dr. Ludeki Chwea. And he visited prisoners at Kingongo Prison in Nyeri County and promised them leather shoes, pullovers, and even a dining hall. Now, Dr. Ludeki also said that there are plans to introduce biogas projects in all prisons that will use the human waste available in the facilities so as to cut down costs. Karen Derry has that story.
The guests of the state at Kingongo Maximum Prison in Nyeri County played host to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Dr. Ludeki Chwea, who was accompanied by the Undersecretary in the same ministry, Dr. Charles Onyoike. The guests bore good news.
Beleni tulikuwa tunaona kama kusema mambo ya viatu itawezekana, tukaona kama haitawezekana. Sasa tumeona wako na viatu.
Shoes for the prisoners to be availed soon. And not just any shoes, leather shoes to be precise.
Kufikia miaka miwili zijazo, kila mtu atakuwa na viatu halisi, leather shoes. Halafu hata tukaanzisha sweater. Na nafikiri hapa Nyeri ni kati ya zile jela zinahitaji sweater kufika haraka, maana hapa Nyeri kuna baridi.
And in a quest to speed up justice, Dr. Ludeki assured the prisoners at Kingongo that the government is keen on hiring more judges.
Shida tu ni kwamba ni wachache na kesi ni nyingi, lakini serikali inazidi kuwateua majaji zaidi na zaidi ili kurahisisha mambo.
Instead of using firewood that is costly,
jela nyingi ambazo zinapika chakula kwa kutumia biogas. Kwa hivyo hakuna kuni tena kule. Kwa hivyo tuna save pesa zetu na pia tunaokoa misitu. Kwa hivyo hapa pia tutatuma pesa, mradi wa biogas ujengeke haraka kabisa.
Biogas plants costing 7 million shillings have already been set up in Embu, Kitui, Kodiaga, Shimolatewa and Kangeta prisons. Carol Derry for KTN at the Kingongo prison in Nyeri County.
Here's a question for you. How do you think the country has been faring in terms of human rights? Well, Kenya is set to present her own report on human rights at the Geneva Conference in Switzerland. And what the conference is focusing on is eradicating torture around the world. KTN's Masi Kandie is actually in Geneva and has filed the following report.
It has a population of about 800,000 and is home to some of the major non-governmental organizations. Geneva, Switzerland, The United Nations Convention on the Committee Against Torture will celebrate its 25th anniversary, with two countries, Kenya and Guatemala, presenting their reports on its progress on torture this week. These steps taken to eradicate torture. Outside the United Nations offices, we meet this group on its 748th day, demonstrating daily against worldwide torture. The fight against torture under UN Committee Against Torture CAT has had 153 states parties to the convention, short of 40 countries within Asia and Africa, with the member states presenting a report to the CAT after every 4 years. This week, Kenyan government representatives will table its report before the committee. Kenyan NGOs, the Kenya section on the International Commission of Jurists, ICJ, Legal Resources Foundation, Kenya Alliance for Advancement of Children, Coalition on Violence Against Women, and the World Organization Against Torture will present its report also to the committee, informing its review on the country's implementation on the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment and punishment.
It's absolutely fundamental that those cases are investigated, that they are brought to justice, and that victims can and witnesses can be part of the process.
Some of the major issues highlighted by the NGOs are extrajudicial killings, female genital mutilation, the post-election violence, among others. The 5-day conference is set to look into matters on human torture and also torture against journalists. Marcy Kandia, KTN, at the United Nations offices in Geneva, Switzerland.
Elsewhere, county governments have been challenged to seek services from the right experts in harnessing the numerous opportunities that the devolved government has brought, as well as in dealing with challenges of putting up strong governance structures at the county level. Speaking after a 2-day devolution workshop in Nairobi, former Member of Parliament Franklin Bett also echoed the calls by a section of politicians who are calling for the dismissal of county commissioners, saying they're hindering governors from executing their mandate effectively.
There shouldn't be any difficulties. Apart from the few disagreements which are emerging between the transitional authority and the devolved government, I wouldn't expect that there should be any problem, because this is actually very profitable, very beneficial to the devolved government, to the people at the grassroots. So by all means, all our leaders and all our professionals should work towards achieving the big objective of making the counties grow without any obstacle.
The system is not new in the world. It is new in Kenya. And it is worth the while that we also pick knowledge from the countries that have put in place these systems. There is no need for an office of a county commissioner, because the way it is framed in the law, it seems to be competing for roles with the governor.
A 52-year-old British investor who agreed to charges of attempting to obtain over 39 million Kenya shillings from U.S. Treasury is now awaiting his sentencing. Clifford Ronald, or by other name Steve Travenier, agreed to 3 charges, criminal charges at that, against him, and remorsefully asked the court to be lenient on him. Clifford is alleged to have forged an Italian passport in 2010 and also tried to obtain 39 million Kenya shillings by attempting to deposit a check fraudulently obtained from the U.S. Treasury. Nairobi Principal Magistrate Peter Ndwiga reserved his sentencing to June 17th this year. Right, just a reminder that the second day of the status conference on the ICC cases, and that's against Deputy President William Ruto, and also radio presenter Joshua Sang, are actually going on at The Hague at the moment, and the pictures you're seeing are live from there. So let's just have a listen.
Delicate balance on part of the chamber when it determines the new trial commencement date, while having regard to specific reasons which occasioned late disclosure on part of the prosecution and other relevant considerations. Your Honors, this concludes our submission on agenda item B. Now I will move on to the next issue, which is the last issue we will address. C, date of the trial and related issues, including defense requests pursuant to Article 63(1) of the Armed Statute. The common legal representative considers that physical presence of the accused person in the courtroom during trial is not a right, but it's an obligation and a constant practice that is well established in the international criminal proceeding. In this regard, we reiterate our submission on the defense request pursuant to Article 63(1) of the Armed Statute that the common legal representative filed on 22nd April 2013. Therefore, we reiterate that such presence of accused person at trial is not a functional expression of the accused's fair trial right, as argued by the defense. Indeed, we recognize that some jurisprudence of this court and other international tribunals indicate that accused person may be allowed not to be physically present in the courtroom under certain circumstances. However, we stress the fact that this is an extraordinary procedure that has been only applied on exceptional basis and only for extremely short period of time. I quote, "Such duration as is strictly required," end of quote, to use the express language of Article 63(2) of the statute. Therefore, firstly, the accused person would have to demonstrate to the court the existence of an exceptional circumstance justifying an application which would seek such an extraordinary measure. And secondly, even when that onus is discharged, permission to be physically absent during the trial would have to be granted for only for limited period of time in order to ensure that there would be no adverse consequences on the integrity of the proceeding.
If you've just joined us, we were looking at the pictures of The Hague, of the second day of the status conference, and that's at the ICC. The cases against Deputy President William Ruto and Joshua Sang, who were not there as they were allowed to travel back yesterday and are being represented by their lawyers. That's Karim Khan and Katwa Kigen. Let's now take a short commercial break. When we come back, we have the business news, so do stay tuned. We'll be back momentarily. Welcome back to KTN Newsdesk. We go to the business and it's more profits for banks. Cooperative Bank of Kenya has recorded a 31% pre-tax profit, equivalent to 3.23 billion shillings for the first 3 months of the year 2013. And that's compared to the same time last year. Co-op Bank's total customer deposits increased to 162 billion, which is just about 16 billion. Total assets increased to 205.3 billion shillings, representative of an 18% growth, while net interest income went up by 23.4% to 4.32 billion shillings. During the year under review, shareholders' equity rose to 31% to cash in 31.5 billion in March 2013. The bank's Q1 results are so far the highest in terms of growth compared to its peers. That's where we wind up this edition of KTN Newsdesk. Thank you for your company. Remember, you can find, read, and even watch some of the stories that we've aired on this show this afternoon on www.standardmedia.co.ke. And it's now time for our Did You Know Fact of the Day. Did you know, in Saudi Arabia, women are allowed to fly aircrafts, but here's a catch. They must be chauffeured to the airport because it's illegal for them to drive a car. Good afternoon, I'm Edith Kimani.